welcome to Halloween Corner to Corner. My name is Jeff, and I'm here in a graveyard tonight with the brain of Paul. And tonight, we're here to spin some stories to scare, tell some tales of terror, and frighten with words of fear. And you might be wondering, and now if you're not quaking in your boots at that terrifying introduction, you might be wondering, why are they doing a Halloween episode on 2 weeks before Halloween? Well, dear listener, I shall tell you why. It's because the episode next week is going to be about the power of the Doctor on the 23rd of October, and then the 30th of October, which is the day before Halloween, is going to be something else that I can't tell you about right now, but will be very exciting. So we're doing our Halloween episode early because it's been bumped because of something else. Bump in the night. So why, why are we doing a Halloween episode?
Why are we doing a Halloween
why
episode,
not?
Jeff?
Tonight we wanted to talk a little bit about some spooky-themed Doctor Who stories and audios. So if you listened to our recent episode, Books, which was about, what was it about, Paul?
Oh, I can't forget, mate. I think the clue was in the title, wasn't it? But
I think we put it in there 3 times just in case people weren't sure. But if you listen to that one where we talked about various Doctor Who books that we liked, I spoke a lot about the novels, the new series novels, and I was pretty much for every Doctor I was like, this one's a little bit spooky. I quite like this one. This one's also a bit spooky.
We detected a theme, didn't we? Yes.
Yeah, I quite like spooky Doctor Who stories, so I've got a couple of audios to talk about tonight. But I'm not going to go kind of super in depth in them, partly because Paul hasn't listened to them, but also I don't want to give away some of their surprises. I want to give you a feel for them and taste them, and hopefully you might go plug them into your ears. But let's start with you, Paul, on one of your nominated spooky episodes.
Okay, let's do that. Yes, I'm going to start
that
with.
You were disgusted with me about.
No, I'm not going to do that one yet. I'm going to do that one afterwards. I'm going to start with.
Oh,
well,
okay.
because we had 2 weeks, didn't we? So, and I was going to nominate the Chimes of Midnight, which is an 8th Doctor audio by Big Finish, 8th Doctor and Charlie. It's one of the really, really early ones. And I remember listening to this.
It's a really early one, isn't it? Yeah.
And it was really, really creepy in a kind of Sapphire and Steel sort of way. Have you ever watched Sapphire and Steel? You ever seen that?
No, I haven't.
You need to fix that right now, my friend, because it will scare the pants off you, my friend. Oh, yes.
Will it?
Very, very creepy. Used to freak me out as a kid. But anyway, Chimes of Midnight was very much like that. But when I started listening to it again, because it's a long time since I listened to it, I realised it's actually not an Halloween episode. It's actually a Christmas episode. So I thought, well, this is Halloween, not Christmas. So, and it's very much in the spirit of figgy pudding and plum duff and all that sort of stuff. So I said, no, Paul, I said to myself, do not listen to this. Nominate something else instead. So I did, and I'm going to nominate for my scary audio. I forgot what it's called. I'm joking. I know exactly what it's called. It's called The Miniaturists. And it's a very recent Doctor Who audio. It's actually on the first Doctor Adventures box set, the second and smallest adventure of the 2, and it's really. And
really would you like to tell people which Doctor it is and who's in it, so then we can plug something?
It's on the first Doctor Adventures box set, like I just told you a minute ago, Jeff. So it therefore features the first Doctor, but actually played not by William Hartnell. Oh no, that would be really creepy, given the fact it was recorded quite recently. The first Doctor is played by Stephen Noonan, And he is joined
Yep.
by companion Dodo, played by the rather wonderful Lauren Cornelius, who we interviewed right here on Who Corners a Corner just a few short episodes ago, Mr. Jeff. Is that not true?
We did. That's correct.
Indeed, we did. And this is the thing, right? Because
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking about this, and it is. I mean, okay, so there's a lot of stuff going on in here, and like you, I'm not going to give it all away. But one thing about Big Finish audios, when they do scary, oh man, they really do scary, don't they? There are so many that you can think of. I was actually going to go for, also in my list, was going to be The Holy Terror, which is terrifying. By Rob Shearman, features Frobisher, the shape-shifting penguin, and it's one of those adventures that kind of starts off a bit of a jolly jape and very quickly turns into some very, very dark places. And I remember listening to that, and it left me gasping. And it was a similar feeling I had with this thing here, actually, The Miniaturist, because of the two stories on this box set, the first one, The Outlaws, is very much kind of Robin Hood type adventure, you know. And to be honest, I found it a little bit blah 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 blah. Yeah, it was a little bit kind of. It wasn't quite my cup of tea, though. I'm sure there's lots of other people who like it, and that's fine. But this one was right up my street. So essentially what happens is the Doctor and Dodo end up going down this really deep mine. It's so deep and it's so dark that there is literally no sound, nothing at all.
Oh, wow.
And the way so you kind of experience that as the Doctor and Dodo and the guy they're going down a lift shaft, and there's some nice clunky lift shaft type noises and a little bit of conversation, and then gradually it all diminishes until there's literally nothing, and there's a kind of a deadness of sound. And you know, the great thing about Big Finish is how they conjure up these soundscapes or these kind of images in our heads by the use of music and atmospheric sounds and stuff like that. They've obviously got a bit of a knack for it now, and they're really good at it. But when they switch all that off, and all you hear is, obviously you don't hear it, but there's like nothing. And I had the headphones on, and it was a weird, freaky feeling, and I was listening to it in the dark, and it kind of freaks me out. And then you start getting this whole thing about voices from something, you know, a small child sort of just flitting out of view. Did you see that? What? Nothing. That sort of stuff, you know. And then you hear these little childish Dodo, 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 Dodo. And of course, Dodo being Dodo, the companions being who they are, they wander off and go look at them, you know. And it's because why wouldn't they? It's that thing of like, don't go into the cellar. And what do? They go into the cellar. But this is a cellar that is deep, deep, deep in the earth, and there's a weird kind of alien thing which has its own agenda there. And I'm not going to spoil it, but I would heartily recommend it. If you know, for that, you know, it's not outright scares. It's probably more suspense than anything, although you know, but
that's what I was going to say. Yeah, it sounds really good, but not perhaps a sort of spooky, ghosty thing particularly, but a kind of fear type thing. It makes me think a little bit of Satan Pit. You know, there's when Ten goes down on the winch thing, you know, and into the black pit, and a little different, but. What's the film where the girls go potholing or whatever it's called?
Oh, I know the one you mean.
Are in the caves. The Descent.
The Descent. That's it. Well done. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good film. Yeah, it's a bit more horrific, perhaps. But
that's for a much older audience group. Mate.
Yes. Yeah.
Older than me. I can't watch stuff like that anymore. It freaks me out. But The Miniaturist is a really good one. I mean, to be fair, you can pick probably loads of Big Finishes. And the great thing is that what Big Finish has done with Dodo is give her... I mean, she always had a sort of personality, but the trouble was, in the TV show, she wasn't really there long enough for us to really get a handle on who she was. But actually, in some ways, that's not a bad thing. I mean, Jackie Lane just sort of breezed in and played her with all the kind of Mancunian / Cockney / Mancunian / Cockney kind of verve and personality she could. But it's really bizarre because she literally just wanders in at the end of an adventure, which, by the way, I don't know if you've ever listened to it, the massacre is really, really dark, really grim, and actually that's quite scary, but not in a sort of spooky way. It's one of the darkest adventures I think that exist in the whole of Doctor Who. It's it's brutal. It's mostly on Stephen, the companion, right? And he gets kind of caught up in this kind of plot against the Huguenots and everything else, and it turns really nasty really quickly. And it's like basically the person who seems to be orchestrating and it's a religious cleansing, but the person who seems to be behind it is the Doctor. It's not the Doctor, it's an abbot, the Abbot of Amboise, who just happens to look like him and is actually played by William Hartnell. But it's not terribly clear in the audio that I listened to, and it's not terribly clear in the book. It's quite ambiguous as to whether it actually is a Doctor. You're kind of left thinking, and of course at the end of it, Stephen doesn't know if it really was a Doctor or not, and he doesn't like the way the Doctor abandoned him, doesn't like the way he was treated through the whole thing, and he's literally walking out of the TARDIS in a real big huff. And of course he met this friend there as well, Anne Chaplet, who was a serving girl. They kind of shared the adventure together, but nobody knows what happened to her. Did she survive the massacre? Did she not? Stephen's really wound up about it. So he's literally walking out the TARDIS. I've had enough, Doctor. I'm going. That's it. He walks out, and there's Dodo Chaplet, who just happens to walk up to this police box in the middle of Wimbledon Common or something, and strangely kind of takes all the steam out of Stephen's kind of huffiness, and in she goes. And then bizarrely, a few adventures later, she literally just says, "Bye, Doc," disappears off to her aunt's at the start of the War Machines, and is never to be seen again. So sorry, that's a bit of a digression, but I would love to hear more about Dodo, and stories like this with her in it, played by Lauren. Fabulous. Give me more Big Finish. Give me more. I want it.
Yeah, I think there's more coming, isn't there? But they're doing more.
So what have you got for us, Jeff?
Well, one of my recommendations is Static, which is a Sixth Doctor adventure with Mrs. Constance Clark, played by Miranda Raisin, and Philippa Flip Jackson, played by Lisa Greenwood. So this one is a few years ago. There's a number of stories with Sixie and Mrs. Clark and Flip, and I really like this trio. Mrs. Clark is a Wren from the war, and she joins the Doctor and sort of starts travelling with him, and she's very kind of prim and proper, and she must be called Mrs. Clark the whole time, and she's never really called Constance, but unless she kind of allows someone to call her that. But she sort of starts to soften and as it goes on, and I really liked her as a companion, and then Flip is a more modern day companion, and there's elements of Rose to her in a way, but she contrasts nicely with Mrs. Clark, because she's a lot more like, not common, that's not the right word, but more kind of modern. Her language is looser than Mrs. Clark's, which is very prim. So there's quite a nice contrast between them, but they have quite a lot of respect for each other, and they actually get on really well. And Six works brilliantly with the pair of them. So I've listened to quite a number of their stories together and really enjoyed them. So in Static, the three of them are looking to sort of take a bit of a break, and they end up being drawn to a caravan site, a camping site in a place called Abbey Marston, and here there's an old stone circle in the woods nearby that was used for human sacrifice hundreds of years ago, and there's also an old RAF research station nearby as well, where they did things during the war that were on the down low. And in this campsite, as is actually often the way with campsites when you're in the middle of nowhere, and I wonder if writer Jonathan Morris got the idea when he was camping or something, but there's no phone signal, no TV signal, no radio signal,
completely
and so
cut off.
it's sort of played like, you're cut off and you mustn't turn this stuff on, and the guy who is sort of the camp, that he's in charge of the campsite is very strict. You mustn't turn them on, and we meet this couple who've gone there they've had a bit of a problem in their relationship, and they've gone there to sort of try and fix things and stuff. And I think his sister has died, or her sister, and there's sort of that's the cause of the tension between them, and he ends up turning the radio on or something at one point. And anyway, in the static that you hear, these voices start coming through to them, and it's the voice of the sister. So it starts to become very kind of unsettling, and like I said earlier, I don't want to kind of give it away, but there's a couple of really good twists in it, and cliffhangers that are really nicely done, and it all starts getting a bit, it starts kind of cranking it all up a bit. Mrs. Clark goes off to investigate, and things happen to her, and then Flip kind of gets stuck on the site, and something happens to the Doctor as well, which kind of it's a really good cliffhanger. You're like, how are they going to get out of this? And then you discover something. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then there's a hidden thing with the guy who's in charge of the campsite as well. So yeah, and it had brilliant sound design on it as well. Using the kind of static and radio. Medium, of course, works brilliantly on audio, and it reminds me actually a bit of a 10th Doctor one that was written by James Goss, which was called Dead Air. And it was one of the ones that the BBC Audio did towards the end of 10's time on TV. And this is one where he's on his own, and he ends up on a cruise liner or a boat of some sort.
I think you told me about this one.
Yeah, I think I did mention it. Yeah, and it's all done through kind of recordings and stuff like that, and radio sort of trying to transmit on maybe it's set in the 60s, and it's all with what do you call it when like Tony Blackburn was out on the boat.
Radio Caroline.
The radio off there. Yes, it's that sort of thing, I think. I sound a bit vague about it all.
It's been a while, isn't it, mate? Hey?
Well, it has been a while since I've listened to them, but obviously they've stuck in my head, and I can't remember the finer details of them all. And also, we have so much audios, books, and the show as well. And if anyone can remember well, you're pretty good at it. Remember the finer details of multiple things like that. Then awesome. So yeah, Static is a really good one. I highly recommend it if you want to be kind of scared, but also have a bit of an emotional centre to it as well.
Okay,
it's quite effective.
So would you say that that's right at the top of your list of spooky, scary stories, or is there any that reach above those heights? Do you think?
I actually really like that one. I also have another one here that I listened to not that long ago, actually. And this, let me just bring it up here. This is a 5th Doctor adventure, and when I tell you its name, you'll see why I went for it. So this is 5th Doctor with Tegan, Nyssa, and Adric in it, and it's called Ghost Walk. So
well, there you go.
When I saw this on Big Finish site, I was like,
"Got to get it.
Give that a go, surely. Got to give it a go." So this is, I think it's set up in Edinburgh, and it initially follows a woman named Leanne who does ghost tours. She does them twice a day, and she takes people around to various different places. I'm just reading the bio here. So there's like the hanging yard, the witch pool, the screaming house.
They do actually do those things, don't they?
Catacombs.
I've
done one in Edinburgh. I went with my wife a few years ago, and they take you around, the old part of Edinburgh. There's a couple of different tour companies actually, and one of them does them underground in the old part of the city, where they kind of built on top of it now. We didn't do that one, which would have been really good, but this one takes you around like to the church or the cathedral or whatever they've got there, and various other places. Then you end up in the churchyard, which is where Greyfriars Bobby was quite well known for, and they take you into sort of the haunted catacomb at the end of it, and it was a really good tour, really good. So this Ghost Walk audio is kind of inspired by all that sort of thing. So in this one, Leanne discovers that there's something in the catacombs, and it's been there for a long time, and there's something evil that wants to come and sort of come back and take over the world, and she meets a ghost in the catacombs that explains all of this to her. And this ghost is called the Doctor, and the Doctor has died hundreds of years ago in the catacombs. So it's another really good cliffhanger, and the story it sort of jumps through multiple time zones, time periods, because you follow the Doctor back in time, which is what leads to him dying, and then he's in Leanne's head, so he's sort of talking to her and guiding her, and then taking her to try to bring him back. And then you also follow Adric in another time period. They realise that things are pretty horrible here, and they find like all these bones and like blood sacrifice stuff in the catacombs.
Cool.
So they try to get out. The TARDIS isn't working,
of course,
and because it doesn't like the place, so it's just shut down. So they use something else to get them out of there. Yeah, and Adric ends up going into a different time period with Tegan, I think, and then he gets sort of accused or mistaken for being like guilty of witchcraft or something, and he goes to be hung and stuff like that. Anyway, it leaps around a lot, and it starts to get quite tense, and
Burn the witch!
It's again quite a scary one. Yeah, I think Tegan gets accused of being a witch actually, and they try to burn her.
Oh, that's just unpleasant.
So that's another one that I would recommend. Which one would I prefer? Do you know what? To be honest, the ideas behind both of them are really good. I think it's your TARDIS team preference. I particularly like Flip and Constance, and actually, as we know, Sixie has got a great life on audio. So,
indeed, yes.
I would probably put my vote for Static on that one.
Good, nice one.
And in fact, that reminds me, we did a tweet earlier to get people's thoughts on Static, and Melvin Pena, who's at Kitchenery, he said, "I got it and loved it. A 6 constant and Flip narrative is the height of good taste," which is true. I'm not going to read the rest of your tweet, Melvin, because it sort of
gives it all away
a little bit.
Naughty madman.
Yeah. And then Faye Wild, who's at Faye Slayer, says, amazing audio. I love the concept behind the villain, which I won't spoil here for those that haven't listened to it yet. Wise. But it's peak Doctor Who horror at its finest. But to contrast that, Quokka Mokka, who's at Mokka Quokka, says, I really like the concept of it and was looking forward to a nice spooky story, but I don't like Flip or Constance as I find them difficult to listen to. So I didn't really get too far into it, I'm afraid. Personal taste, I know some people love
like
them.
You said, it's your
if you're listening,
TARDIS team preference, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, and I will say, Quokka Mokka, if you don't like Flip and Constance, I can appreciate that it makes a listen harder, but this is a story that you don't kind of find out much about the villain until kind of part 3. It's quite sort of cleverly kept from you. Yeah, so it's a very slow build to things, and Melvin has hinted there at something in the story, which is good. So yes, I shall say no more on that.
Interesting.
Yeah, so those are two really good ones. I've got another one that I want to mention shortly.
You're going to wait?
Let's go. Let me hand over to you.
Hand over to me. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the Scary Ghost Corner with me, the Brain of Paul. Yeah, I get a bit carried away. I love this time of year because I love it when it starts getting dark. And for me, when I was a little kid or a little nipper, it was like there's two things that would happen at this time of year. Well, maybe a little bit earlier, actually. So you start getting the trailers towards the end of the school holidays that the new Doctor Who season was starting. And it'd be something to really look forward to. And with the nights getting dark and all that sort of stuff. But obviously, it would also mean you're back at school in a few weeks, so that was always a bit of a bummer. Really, it was like all this great stuff and then the boring stuff as well. But okay. So anyway, enough of that rambling. I have chosen, as you.
No, you're right. This is this is one of my favourite times of year. I did, yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to get in on this
positively to my rant. I'm joking. Sorry, mate. Go on.
Falling off the trees and. it's pumpkin time.
I love this time of year.
Then,
yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah, the air is crisp, and then it's my birthday, and then we're moving towards Christmas.
Something happened with the recording
just
now.
past my birthday.
I think we just lost you there a minute, Jeff. I don't know if we can get that back. Sorry, what you said? Something about apples, was it?
Well, yeah. Wait, is it apple bobbing time?
I love apple bobbing.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to choose a TV story for my second choice, and
okay.
And it's a Fourth Doctor story, played by obviously the Fourth Doctor is played by Mr. Tom Baker, the godhood of Doctor Who himself. And there were so many. You could literally throw a stick at any Fourth Doctor story and it will probably hit something with a good scare factor in it, right?
Yes.
Because they just seem to get them. But I kind of narrowed it down. There was Image of the Fendal, which is it's just pure ghost scares, monsters and possessions and demonic kind of skulls and things that harken back to the myths of primordial time, all that sort of stuff. So that's good. That was a possible, but I don't really like the story so much, so I discounted that. There's the Stones of Blood from later on, with the Doctor and Romana, and that's a good one as well, but it's probably only mildly creepy for the first sort of 20 minutes or so, although it does have a really creepy-ass end of part one cliffhanger, where Romana just walks off a cliff. Literally, she walks off a cliff. Okay, she thinks she's hearing the Doctor's voice from beyond the cliff, and she can't see that she's at the end of the cliff, and she's kind of been spooked by some weird kind of what seems to be a supernatural kind of spiritual druidic goddess type thing. So, but it's something else, and I'm not going to spoil it if you haven't seen it. And it's also got moving stones that eat blood. So hence the title, The Stones of Blood. So it's a good one. Yeah. So that was quite high on my list. And I was really tempted to go for Horror of Fang Rock, which is just a masterclass in tension, storyline, plotting, character and everything else. But in terms of scares and that, it does have a few, and it makes use of its isolated setting, a lighthouse on a very foggy, storm-ridden, craggy coast. But I've actually gone for one of your favourites, Jeff, I know this, The Brain of Morbius.
It is. I've watched this one times.
So disappointing. Can't believe it.
I have to confess, I haven't watched this one, which is a shocker. Paul was even talking to me for a couple of days.
I literally fell off my sofa, my comfiest sofa as well.
But I knew all about the Morbius doctors and stuff, because Chibs took that obscure random moment and made it count, important.
There's so much.
So this is one I need to watch.
So the Brain of Morbius, right? Let me tell you about the Brain of Morbius, right? So it was actually written by the master of Doctor Who himself. But yes, the Hinchcliffe Holmes era is really the pinnacle, I think, of this kind of thing, and it ripped off loads and loads of Hammer horror movies, loads of B movies, all the Universal monster pictures. The Mummy became the Pyramids of Mars. There was a script which Terrance Dicks had written for vampires, for a kind of a Dracula kind of flavoured thing, but that didn't go into production until much later in the decade. It eventually became A State of Decay in season 18. So that was replaced by The Horror of Fang Rock the following year, actually. But it was around that sort of time. But one thing Terrance did write, of course, was The Brain of Morbius, which is a kind of a riff on the Frankenstein myth. So it features a monster, a mad scientist, a laboratory, a sisterhood, and a brain in a jar. And it is just brilliant. But here's the thing behind it, right? So Terrance had written this script, which he thought was brilliant, and the monster was originally a robot, and there was loads of kind of irony about the robot desiring a kind of good-looking body to house its brain and all that kind of thing, right? And then he sent it off to Robert Holmes, because obviously Robert said to him, Terrance, could you write us a story, mate? I'm a little bit slack on something and I need a story off you. And Terrance is right, yes, no problem, I shall do it. And he rattles off this thing. And then, of course, now the tables are turned, right? So Terrance Dicks used to be the script editor, a few years previous in John Pertwee's days, and he would ask the same thing of Robert Holmes, right? And when Robert would send his script in, Terrance Dicks would quite happily rewrite bits, cut bits out, and put new bits in, and make them kind of fit the whole series arc and whatever other ideas, and make sure things weren't copied across other stories and all of that. But Robert Holmes did that to Terrance's story, right? To Terrance's script, and in Terrance's own words, he bloody butchered it, right? So. And when Terrance was sent back the revised scripts, now the feeling I get and the image I get is of Robert Holmes, who, from looking at the photographs, looks like quite a macabre sort of guy anyway, and he obviously clearly loved the scares. But I can just imagine him sitting there with his pipe, putting a red pen through Terrance's scripts, changing a couple of lines, and then going, yeah, changing a few more lines, and that's a good idea, and then changing a few more, and then actually just tearing up whole pages and then putting something in completely of his own. Anyway, long story short, at the end of the day, Terrance gets back the revised scripts, and he rings up Robert Holmes in an absolute apoplectic, violent rage. The gentlest man in the whole of Doctor Who is in an absolute rage that his scripts have been butchered so badly. He calms down, apparently, and they have a little chat, and he says to Robert, look, there's no point you putting my name on it. I didn't write a single line of dialogue in there, or not a single line of dialogue belongs to me. So Robert Holmes and Hinchcliffe are like, well, what should we put on there? I think they had a couple of pseudonyms, like Stephen Grief or something. Was it? No, Steve, whatever it was. Anyway, they had a few. And Terrance goes, oh, just use any bland pseudonym. So Robert Holmes, he goes, yes, that's what we'll be. We'll call it Robin Bland, because I robbed the story and is very bland. So he literally took Terrance as a bit of a joke. But I tell you what, mate, what they turned out from, Holmes's rewriting of Terrance's story is an absolute stone cold classic. Now, when you watch this on TV, I think it's best to watch it as a kind of theatre production. As imagine you're watching it on stage. I think that's the best way to look at a lot of those,
which a lot of old Who
stories.
is like, really, isn't it?
It is. It's a studio-bound story, so don't expect sweeping, rolling vistas of crashed spaceships and mountainous nightmare jagged shapes that go crash in the night. They attempt to do some of that, but it's on a very small studio set, so you've got to let your kind of imagination go with it. Now, this story actually was the second ever Doctor Who book that I owned. It's actually number 2, right. And I have 2 of them. Look at that. See, there's two covers there. One with the red one with the red cover, and one with the yellow cover. Oh, yeah. And they're both exactly the same. But I'll tell you what, right? So on its... There are multiple ways to read this story. First one, if you're watching it on TV, yes, think of it as a theatre production. The acting seems to vary between really, really good stuff, like was it Philip Maddock, who plays the mad scientist, Dr. Solon. There's also Michael Spice in there as well, giving us the voice of Morbius, and he was also I think it was Magnus Greel a year later in The Talons of Weng Chiang. But he's a very shouty villain, and he's given to hyperbole quite a lot, and I'm not a big fan of shouty villains. I like them to be a little bit more characterful. However, that does not detract from the story, because I was watching it again and it's an absolute masterclass. So it sets the scene. The TARDIS arrives on this storm-racked planet, and there's a whole graveyard of spaceships around. But before the TARDIS arrives, there's this kind of creeping figure, somebody stalking the rooms. It turns out it's like an alien insect life form. You see bits of it revealed in the lightning from the storm, and it's brilliant. Again, it's only a studio, but it looks pretty good. They've obviously turned the lights down as far as they can on this thing without the lighting guys kicking off. Except they probably did kick off, because that's what they used to do. You can't literally see anything on this apart from these weird shapes. But it's
yeah. They often had some really good sets back then.
They did have some good sets. There's a castle set.
Not Mirror of Eden. There's a really good jungle and stuff.
Or the Planet of Evil, actually, which is in this same season. So this is season 13. And again, that could have been another one which rips off Jekyll and Hyde. So they're all ripping off these things. But you're making me digress, Mr. Jeff. So Anyway, back to the Brains of Morbius very, very quickly. this is, on the one hand, a kind of blatant Frankenstein ripoff. It makes no bones about it, which is another reason why Terrance Dicks wasn't so impressed. It was like so obviously Frankenstein that he just, there was no subtlety to it at all. It's not allegory. It's right in your face. There is, as I said, there's a mad scientist. There's a monster made of bits and pieces of all the different alien races that have crashed on this planet, which is the planet of Khan, and it's just purely blatant, like I said. But within that, right, there is a lot of Doctor Who legend, if you like. The Brain of Morbius establishes quite a lot of the sort of mythology that has built up around the whole Doctor Who thing over the years. There's a throwaway line in the first episode. So you've got the Sisterhood of Khan. They're the keepers of this elixir of life, which is a kind of byproduct of this flame that burns up through from the center of the planet, and it reacts with some chemicals in a bunch of rocks, and it drips, and as it condenses, it drips down and forms this elixir, which is also used by the Time Lords in the case of emergencies with regeneration or accidents or something. It can speed the regeneration process. It can heal a Time Lord and stuff like that.
We see that in Night of the Doctor.
Exactly. I was so excited when we went back to Khan with the Eighth Doctor in that little story. I thought it was brilliant. And the sister who greets the Eighth Doctor in that, she's called Ohila. And I thought, oh, is that the same as Ohika from the Brain of Morbius? Could it be the same character? Maybe it was, but I don't know. But the character in the Brain of Morbius is called Ohika. It's only a letter's difference. Who knows? Over time, it might have been her, or maybe Stephen Moffat just got it a little bit wrong. Who knows? But anyway, it's a lot of fun. But there's so much stuff, and it's all, Jeff, it's all throwaway stuff as well. It's just like made up, whether it's Terrance or whether it's Robert Holmes. Nobody really knows. It's probably Robert Holmes, but who knows? Terrance was good at this stuff as well. They would just throw in lines. There's a line here where the old lady of the Sisterhood is sort of going on about how no ships can come close to Khan because there's this magnetic field. It's not actually. It's actually the influence of the Sisterhood. They don't want anybody stealing their elixir. And she comes out with this thing here. No ship can approach this planet without detection. Even the silent gas dirigibles of the Muthi I felt in my bones while they were still a million miles distant. She doesn't talk like that. She's much more theatrical than that. But that line there, right? Paul Cornell decides to take and spins out a whole new adventures novel of it, right? One line, one word in one line. The Muthai. It's actually Muthai in the book, which is really weird, but it's Muthai in the TV series. And he comes out with one of the best new adventures novels ever. You know, it's astonishing. It's brilliant. There's also, like you said, the Morbius Doctors, right? We get that deadlock, that power play towards the end of episode 4 where Morbius and the Doctor are playing a sort of, they're dueling. They're doing a Time Lord mind duel, which used to be a game, but taken to extremes, it can be really dangerous. And the idea is to gain a mental advantage, a mental exertion over your opponent via this piece of scaffolding. And that's represented by showing us the faces of each Time Lord as they are pushed back further in their timeline by their opponent. And the idea is to get so far back that their mental ability to hold up their defences collapses. It's like, yeah, sorry, mate, you win. Okay, yeah, well done, and all the rest of it. And the Doctor is really suffering. And Morbius pushes the Doctor back and back. So we see that wonderful montage of the Fourth Doctor turning into the Third Doctor, turning into the Second Doctor. The First Doctor, then someone who looks suspiciously a bit like actually Robert Holmes and Philip Hinchcliffe and Dougie Camfield, the director, and a few other people. But is that the Doctor? Is that Morbius? We don't know. But then Morbius says, "How far back, Doctor? How many lives have you had?" And like you said, that gives rise to the whole, or was maybe sat in Chris Chibnall's brain and gave rise to the whole timeless children thing. I played that to Freya after we watched The Ghost Monument. And she goes, "Oh, so it all starts there then, because it was the second time we watched the Ghost Monument, and she goes, "Oh, the Timeless Child, that's in here." I said, "Oh yeah, but it started even before that. Let me play you this."
Right.
So I played the end of the Brain of Morbius for her. It is full of moments. At one point, Sarah Jane gets blinded, right, and she can't see where she's going. I think every cliffhanger ends on a moment where Sarah Jane, either blind or visible, somehow encounters the monster, and it is increasingly horrific. Yes, sometimes it is a bit theatrical. Like I said, you've got to watch it thinking you're watching a stage production. Sometimes it helps if you do that, but if you can get past that, actually the story is as grim as it gets, right? There is a patchwork corpse, right? A life form that has been put together by Crazy Solon, who is a member of the cult of Morbius. Morbius himself being a renegade Time Lord who went bad, who stirred up this huge religious army that went to war with the Time Lords. He was hunted down, finally cornered on planet Khan, and put to death, executed by the Time Lords, with his atoms scattered to the four corners of the universe, apparently, according to Marin, the chief of the Sisterhood. But let me read you this little bit here, right? So there's, I'm going to read you this from the book. This is where Sarah Jane, who is blind, is wandering through Solon's castle, which actually, again, it's not actually a castle, though it is a castle. It's a hydrothermal plant, you know, there's some sort of like atmosphere processing, but it looks like a Gothic castle, right, with Art Nouveau details. But within those details, there's little technological details as well. In the set, it is brilliant, you know, there's little details, it just, oh, I love it. But anyway, right, so here's Sarah Jane. She's sort of wandering through this castle, and she's come into this room, and she's hearing a voice, and the voices start screaming at her. "You lie!" screamed the voice. "You came to kill me! You she-devils want to destroy me before I can wreak my vengeance on you!" Sarah peered blindly towards the voice, wondering if she was trapped with a madman. And so indeed she was, in a way, though with one that had, for the moment, no power to harm her. Sarah wished desperately that she could see, but perhaps, at this moment, her blindness was something of a blessing. The anguish-threatening voice that so terrified her came from a greenly glowing tank in the centre of the room. The tank was filled with nutrient fluids. In its centre floated a spongy, grey and purple mass, the still living brain of Morbius. Cue end credits, etc., blah blah blah.
Yeah,
blah, blah.
that's pretty
it's
grim.
Awesome. It is
image,
really,
isn't it?
really grim.
Yeah.
And you know, you look at the chapter titles in the book, right? A graveyard of spaceships, the keepers of the flame, the horror behind the curtain, the horror in the crypt. The monster walks, monster on the rampage, Deathlock. There's no bones about it. This is out and out horror in a way that only Doctor Who really used to do. Well, okay, so Hammer House, the Hammer House of Horror Studios used to do them as well, because that's what these are ripped off of. But Doctor Who did it for kids, allegedly, right? The Hammer House films were for adults. But there's not a huge amount of difference between those and the Doctor Who stories of the Hinchcliffe years, and they are absolutely fabulous. And you know, I love them to bits. They are, you know, like I've said on this podcast before, The Brain of Morbius is one of my earliest Doctor Who memories. And I was really worried when I eventually got around to watching it. I think the first time I actually really saw it properly since my very, very early childhood was when it came out on VHS in the 90s, I guess. And it was a kind of omnibus edition. And it was all 4 episodes kind of rammed into one sort of 80-minute special or something with no episode breaks or anything like that. And it was a bit of a slog, I'm not going to lie. It was difficult to watch, because it didn't quite seem to flow right, and I didn't realise actually it had been quite heavily chopped around a bit. They didn't just take the start and the end of the episodes out, they actually chopped a few other bits out as well to kind of make it fit the time format. So when it was eventually released as a full 4-episode unadulterated version, again on VHS, that was the first time I truly watched it for what it was. And when you watch these things, I think one episode at a time with even a day or so in between, actually they're much better because that's how the story was structured. You know, the beginning and the middle of an end is of a single episode. It's not the beginning, middle, of an end of a story that's stretched across 4 episodes. Sometimes it is, but more often it isn't. Each episode is structured with a first, a second, and a third act, and it's that's kind of how they work, especially with those sort of, you know, those 70s type stories, and they kind of work to a formula in a way. It was a very short-lived formula, and it was there really stewarded under this or under the. It was shepherded under the stewardship. I'm mixing my metaphors. It was either a shepherd or a steward or a caretaker. Anyway, Robert Owensworth wrote them all, pretty much. Script edited them all, oversaw them all, was a caretaker of them all, brought them all into fruition, birthed them, gave them living energy, and brought them all to life.
It lives.
It lives. Yeah. So there you go, my friend. That is the brain of Morbius in a very chaotic nutshell.
We had some tweets from other people who have actually seen it.
I think we're going to really have to look at your fan credentials, mate. I mean, I don't want to come over all gatekeepery, but...
You don't want to, but you did.
I do. I love it. I love it. Yeah.
So this is at DDP Kendrick.
Oh, yes.
He says, I really love this episode and this era as a whole. Either my favourite or second favourite era of the show's history. Just all round great, and it goes to show how good season 13 is for me.
I love it.
Ripper Metal God Rich, who is at Ian Robrich, says one of Doctor Who's finest stories. Brilliant performances from the regular and supporting cast. 10 out of 10 for me. Tim Matthews, who is at Disused Yeti 76, says glorious, sacred farts and all.
Sacred fire, sacred flame, sacred fire. It's great. The Sisterhood are great because they have a movement which was actually choreographed with their hands, and it looks kind of weird, witchy, kind of wickery, sort of spooky. That kind of freaks me out more than anything, I think.
They were quite spooky in Night of the Doctor, you know, in that cave there, and all their hoods and stuff like that.
Yeah, weirdly. I mean, I love that. As much as I love that, I thought in a way it kind of looked, and I watched it again after this, and I thought, it does look a bit too... It looks too polished in a way. Part of the atmosphere. I mean, Freya said she's watched a few of these 70s things now. She hasn't watched this one all the way through. But she's always said she finds the 70s stories more scary than the modern day series. And I think a lot of it is because quite often it's sharper. You know, because it's on video, studio brightly lit video, quite often there's no hiding place from terror.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's there, right there. That does mean that all the flaws are exposed, but if you're caught up in the story, you don't see the flaws. You just get the atmosphere through it.
That's the thing, yeah. You know, back you know, if you were watching this when it went out, you know, TV and film was what it was at the time. You wouldn't watch it and think, oh, that's bad, because you wouldn't know any different. You know, like if you saw a mistake, you know, like
if a boom microphone suddenly comes in,
a boom was in shot.
There was a few times when that would happen. But you're right, because the other thing of that is that TVs were a lot smaller and far lower resolution in them days.
Yeah,
so you could get away with an awful lot. And in one way, that is why the studios had to be lit so brightly, because actually the image on those old tallies would never have been able to. It would just be a complete murky mess. And the other thing, obviously, as you know, Jeff, the cameras wouldn't have been able to pick up any of the detail anyway, unless it was bright, unless it was well lit.
Exactly.
So there is a reason for it. And I know we keep going on about it. And, you know, we're watching these things now on, you know, 50, 60-inch high definition, ultra high definition, 4K TVs, where there is literally no hiding place. Everything that is a piece of plastic looks like a piece of plastic. I was watching 2001: A Space Odyssey on 4K a couple of weeks back, actually, which is a film I love. And of course, that, you know, the special effects from that, the model shots of spaceships, are quite rightly lauded for being the best of their kind from 1969. But in 4K high resolution, they look like spaceship models. And I was, I'm thinking, I can see that they're models. And I was so disappointed. You know, it's like, take me back to the old days.
But back in '69, you wouldn't have known any different. You know.
Sorry, diversion again. More tweets. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. This is Lucy McCall. I love it. The characterisations are great. Philip Maddock is especially
he's
good,
lovely.
and he
Brilliant.
is matched by the Doctor, Sarah Jane, and Cynthia Greville. It's very Hammer horror in feel, and especially in the setting and the lumbering condo.
Oh, I didn't even mention.
I don't know if you.
did I? Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw this, Paul, but Lucy actually did a knitted tribute to the great man. So there's a little knitted teddy holding the brain.
I've done it now. Well done, Lucy. Yes, love that.
Yeah, but it's really cool. Power of the Morgan Hoovian, who's at Morgan Hoovian YT, says, love how Morbius was created in the style of Frankenstein. Very eerie.
Very.
Andy Parkinson at Caffrey71 says, it's a great story. Liz and Tom are wonderful. Philip Maddock knocks it out of the park and we get some Doctor Timeline controversy. Do these faces during the mind-bending contest belong to the Doctor or Morbius? That's like you said. This is a good tweet. Eric Harlow, whose handle is at Eric_even, says the Morbius Doctors canon have always been canon. I don't know why I'm yelling because he's written in capitals.
It's written in capital.
And then this one here is from our friend Lautaro Medina, who's at Doc Lautaro, and he says, I love that part where he says it's morbing time and morbed all over the Doctor. I think he's referencing Morbius there. But he says, but seriously, this is Frankenstein through a Doctor Who lens. It's atmospheric and manages to include many lore aspects that resonate to this day. Its influence is unparalleled.
Absolutely right. Yes, exactly. Just a little pastiche rip-off Frankenstein story that has set...
And it's all these years later, it's still doing its...
Still doing it. It's got Time Lords. I mean, actually, also, the thing about the Doctor being used by the Time Lords, I know that was kind of there with Genesis of the Daleks and sort of touched on in the Third Doctor's era, but again, it's back here. This is the Doctor landing on a planet. He doesn't know the Time Lords have sent him. He suspects they have. He doesn't even want to get involved at the start of it. He's shaking his fist at the skies, the stormy, lightning-racked skies, and swearing at the Time Lords and sulking and playing with his yo-yo. And it's Sarah Jane who sort of pulls him into the story by looking at finding the wrecked graveyard of spaceships there. You had another one for us, didn't you?
Yes, I did have another one. So this actually is a Fourth Doctor audio. And this is The Haunting of Malkin Place. So this is another scary one. And I actually bought this because it was called the most scary Big Finish. So I thought, well, I've got to get in on that one. So
it speaks to me.
the Doctor and... Yeah. The Doctor and Romana are on a train. They're on their way to visit somewhere. And they have they bump into a spiritualist on the train, and it sends them on the trail of a ghost, and it's sort of really convincing story of a haunting. And it's funny because the concept of ghosts exists in Doctor Who, doesn't it? But they're not ever actually ghosts. It's a bit like witches, in the Shakespeare Code. They're not really witches, are they? And I think the Doctor says something like magic like this doesn't exist.
Yeah, the Third Doctor makes a point of that in The Demons, which actually was another one I was thinking about for this as well, actually.
Yes, that's one of my favourites. Yeah, I love that one.
It's pure Halloween scares, isn't it? Yeah, that's brilliant.
That's a great episode, yeah. And it reminds me a bit of Thor, actually, in the first film, when he says, magic is just science that is not understood yet.
I think that's what Arthur C. Clarke said. I think he coined that phrase originally.
Yes, Thor. Yeah, I was going to say I knew there's that as well. So Thor's spin on it is slightly different. But yeah, so they go and investigate this haunting. And it does appear to be real, and so they go to this Malkin Place house, and there's all sorts of there's like crying children noises, and birds are flying around and stuff like that, and there's a séance as well, and I remember I was listening to it on the train actually because it obviously stuck in my head, and the sort of eerie feel and the sort of tension of it builds up, and the end of the first part was really quite unsettling, actually. So yeah, this was a really good one, and I would also recommend that. So, I've given a Sixth Doctor scary one there, and a fourth one
as well
here. Yeah. So yeah, that's good. And there's others as well. The Fourth Doctor audios. There is a lot of kind of horror influenced stuff as per the show. So there's stuff like the Labyrinth of Buda Castle, which is a sort of a Dracula-y type thing, and then there's it's about it's kind of a riff on Madame Tussauds.
Okay.
So they find these wax figures that are sort of alive and stuff like that. I can't remember its name off the top of my head, that one. But that was also really good. And there's like the Crooked Man as well, which is a sort of creature that comes out and he's got a really sort of cracked voice and stuff like that. That was also a really good one as well. So there's a lot that are kind of horror influenced there as well. And it's funny because the show itself, I mean, doesn't really do it that much. I mean, we had Hyde with the 11th Doctor, which is sort of a haunted house type piece.
Yeah, that
and
was quite fun.
It was good, and I haven't watched it in a while. Maybe that's worth a rewatch. And obviously, Listen with the 12th Doctor, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah,
I mean, that was
full of creeps.
Really. Yeah, it really was. That bit with the blanket on the bed there.
Yeah.
Even now, like, it's chilling. That's one of Moffat's strengths is the sort of slightly
what was
scary
that other one
thing.
with the was it a Matt Smith story with the peg dolls? Did you see that one?
Oh,
what was that called? Was that Night Terrors?
Night Terrors, yeah.
That was,
I remember that one being only okay, and then I did a rewatch on it on that series a little while ago and thought actually it wasn't too bad. They sort of lumber at everything, don't they?
Yeah, but they look freaking weird though, don't they?
Yeah, they're sort of quite horrible looking.
It's that slightly off-human look about them, like something not quite finished and crude.
Yeah. And then there was Knock Knock with 12th Doctor, wasn't there?
Series 10, indeed.
It has Poirot in it, and I remember thinking that one was kind of an odd episode. And I kind of liked it because it starts out really in a haunted house, and then it turns into something actually I found quite surprisingly emotional with the sort of the mother and stuff like that. And she's all wood, and it was sort of like two different types of things mashed together, but it sort of worked. So yeah, I kind of liked it.
And of course, we have the haunting of Villa Diodati as well.
Oh, Villa Diodati, yeah. Do you know what? Actually, that's
a banger.
Yeah, it is. Isn't
I was
it?
watching
That's
that the other night
the
in my
most horror.
Yes, it is.
Your rewatch. That is the most out and out of certainly the recent, of New Who. Yeah, that's a superb episode.
And there's ghosts in that because Graham sees. He goes, I keep seeing dead people, and he sees like the old maid and her daughter, or young girl at least.
That's it. Yeah.
And he says at the end, so what was it with those two then? And they're all like, what? What do you mean? What do you mean? What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's not properly explained.
Yeah,
is it?
that's it. So they could have been ghosts.
Yeah. And then of course we had the Halloween Apocalypse in Flux.
Yes, we did.
Didn't really have much.
Wasn't really a spooky
Halloween-y
story,
stuff
but
in
it was set in Halloween, so it qualifies in my book.
Yeah. Yes, and I like the way that it actually went out on Halloween last year. They'd obviously planned that. Yeah. So yeah, that's my couple of spooky audio recommendations. So if anyone takes a listen to those, do let us know what you think. I hope you enjoy them and they make you unsettled and creeped out. And if anyone else has got any other spookies to recommend, give them to me. I want to hear them.
You'll take them off your hands. And if anybody out there, because I know some of you are quite new to Doctor Who and discovering these things for yourself, which is fabulous. There is so much of it, so much to enjoy. And I tell you what, if you haven't yet watched The Brain of Morbius, like my good friend Jeff, go out and watch it. Watch it. Do it now. You will love it. If you don't, you can have your money back. Not that there is any.
I did look it up
still
on Amazon, and it was only a $5.
It is a stone cold classic. You've been waiting for it to come out in the collection box sets, haven't you?
Yeah,
it is overdue.
Really,
I mean, we've got season 12, and we've got season 14. 13 is the one with Pyramids of Mars, the android invasion, the Planet of Evil.
Yep.
I think Terror of the Zygons is there as well, isn't it? That's the one that kicks it off.
I have got
which
that,
is another one.
Yeah.
And of course, we finish with the Seeds of Doom as well, which is quite a mess too. Basically, giant seed pod takes over a country house in the home counties. So that's and actually that's got its horrific moments as well. Oh my goodness me! When the crinoid creature starts taking over its human host, and it's in this kind of halfway point where this guy who's started sprouting leaves and a bit of growth suddenly becomes almost vegetable. It is disgusting. It'd make an all sick, that would. It was brutal. It's nasty, and I think this is the thing. Actually, a lot of the scares are visual as much as anything else. It's like, I think they did have a policy of scaring the crap out of kids. Back in those days, they just wanted to do it, and until Mary Whitehouse put her size 10
Mary
into
Whitehouse
things,
got a bit upset.
They were getting really carried away with it all. But I loved all that.
Yeah.
It's great fun. The Ark in Space, actually, that's another one. Yeah, honestly, I'd say we should wrap it up. But I remember the Ark in Space. On the one hand, you have this brightly lit, sheer white, clinical, sterile.
Yeah.
Totally soulless set, which in its way is quite terrifying. It's terrifying in its emptiness, in its sterility, and wandering through that when you get Noah, who's been transformed into one of the alien wasp-like Wirren. It's nasty. It's mostly bubble wrap, but the performance and the atmosphere 100% sells it.
He starts changing, doesn't he? Like his hand and his
and
his
they
face
put a
and
bit of an
stuff like
effect
that,
on it. There's a bit of a video effect, so it does still look kind of creepy. But then there's another set in that story which is the complete opposite. It's dark and it's spooky.
Like
it's
under
the solar stacks, and it's lit just by these little green hexagonal plates of light.
Yeah.
On the other side of which is something squirming. Oh man, it's just horrific.
Yeah. Yeah, wish they'd do something a bit more.
And actually, the novel of that as well, the novelisation of the Ark in Space. I don't know if I've said it before, but again, if you haven't read it, go out and read it because it is pure body horror. It's not written for kids. It was written by Ian Marter, who played Harry Sullivan. If you didn't know, I'm sure you did.
Right.
But he was well into that. The Sontaran Experiment was another one he wrote from, which the story after the Ark in Space. And again, his depiction of the Sontaran, as a garg, as a sort of alien troll. You smell it. He describes the smell of it, the stench of it, the oil and the gas and the kind of sweat off the thing. You feel it. And of course, that's a story all about torture. And he goes a little bit far on that as well. So what you get in the book is way more than you ever saw on the TV.
The show, right.
Anyway, I'll shut up now. Go on. Go for it.
Well, yeah, I hope you've enjoyed listening to our spooky recommendations, and I know we're a little bit early before Halloween.
Yeah, but if you're listening to this after Halloween, then we'll be late. Yeah. Or if you listen to it on Halloween, we'll be fine.
Yeah,
that's the beauty of the podcast, mate.
But yeah, exactly. It's a bit.
You'll be listening to this in 10 years' time, and you'll be saying like, and if you're listening to this, why are we a little bit early? No, that was 20 years ago. That was. I not early at all, is he? I've gone and done it, mate. I've gone and done it. Where's my teeth gone now? Hey. We could be like, if we're doing this podcast in, I don't know, 30, 40 years, we'd be all right, Jeff. How's it going,
we'll have
mate?
to put some voice modulation on to hide the old age.
I'm going to be a brain in a jar. That is my future. Morbius gave me my future.
Yeah. So if you're listening to the podcast in real time, we'll be back next Sunday
indeed.
For our review or crying fest for The Power of the Doctor. Yeah. Oh man, it's still not really hit me yet. It's nearly over.
It's nearly finished.
So yes, we will be back then, and do keep an eye on our Twitter. We've got some exciting stuff coming up over the next couple of weeks, and more chats with other fans as well. So we will be hopefully entertaining you for a good long while.
At least another 40
years. Thanks for listening. Yeah, that long a while. Yeah. So yeah, thanks everyone, and we'll catch you next time.
Indeed. Enjoy and Have a spooktastic day.
Good night.